Beyond the Wire is a dead game. Now, I know that term gets thrown around a hell of a lot, but when a game which is focused on 50v50 player games and the game struggles to get even more than 5 players on average on every day of the week, it's dead. The only real activity the game gets is on weekends when there's like a pre-arranged community event to get more players on, but that doesn't ever fill up a single server. So yeah, it's not enough for the game. And it makes you wonder, like, if the devs have actually abandoned the game. Well, their Twitter is still active. I mean, they still post about the game on there. But in terms of the game's support, the last patch was in December and there's been no news since. And one big thing that stands out to me is that the devs, or the publishers you could say, have no servers for the game. There's only 2 to 3 active servers for this game, and they're all community ran. To me, that's a massive flag that the game has been abandoned. And, you know, bless these guys, it's Wolves at War and Big Red 1, but I think the Big Red 1 server only put their server up at the weekend. Those are the only active servers. So if these communities decide to take their servers down, then you cannot play this game at all. There's no offline play. There is an offline shooting range, but who's gonna buy a 50v50 multiplayer game to play a shooting range? I mean, no one's gonna do that. I really want to know why the devs have no servers for it. It's really disgraceful. And for these 2 communities that actually have servers, I mean, for them, like, communities do make money through Patreon or other sort of donations which they use to like fund servers, and these servers they have open for Beyond the Wire, they're probably just a negative in terms of like cost. Like, there's no people that are probably going to be paying to keep these servers alive. So in my eyes, why would they have these servers open? I think the Wolves at War servers, they don't have the community events on them, I think, so what's the point in having those 2 active when really you're not going to get really any players going on it? And the Big Red 1 server, if that's only active at the weekend, I think it probably makes more sense for them to try and group up with the Wolves at War guys to maybe arrange something on that Wolves at War server and maybe like co-sponsor the server or something. If I was running a community and I had servers open for a game that no one was playing, I would take those servers down. And I do think, while I've never spoken to the Wolves at War or the Big Red 1 guys about their Beyond the Wire server, if it was me, I would take those servers down, because what's the point in having them open when they really don't get used? And I do think that they could be taken down soon. While again, I'll say I've not spoken to these communities about them, but really, what's the point in having them open? And if those servers do come down, the game is, 100% not playable. And because of that, I think Offworld Industries, the publisher for the game, should pull the game from sale, or at least make it free to play. Again, it's disgraceful that they have no official servers themselves. And for a game that came out of early access in August 2022, that's not even been a year old yet, and the devs and publisher have no official way to play the game that they're supplying themselves. It is disgraceful. It also makes no financial sense for the devs to continue working on the game, since really no one's going to be playing the game or buying it. Then why waste money on developers developing something for a dead game? And it is rumoured that the developers of Beyond the Wire, Redstone Interactive, are actually working on the new Starship Troopers game. That is rumoured. I've got no concrete evidence on that. If someone does find that, chuck it down in the comments below. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that means no further patches. And since the last one was in December, and no more information on Steam about further patches, then yeah, I can think that there's going to be no further updates for this game. And again, considering this game really fully released in August 2022, and it's only had, 4 months worth of support from the devs? That is a disgrace. But why did this game fail? Why is there no players? Well, looking at recent Steam reviews, which is mostly negative at about 39%, but overall it's mostly positive at about 73%. And recent ones talk about really just the game being dead and no other negatives. But positive reviews praise the sound design, the visuals, the general ambience, the great gameplay, the gunplay, and the melee system. Pretty much praising the whole game. So Why did it die? Why did the players leave? Well, one reason is that it was an early access game. And when you release an early access game, a bunch of players will buy the game on launch month, and then you will generally see players drop off quite quickly. And for Beyond the Wire, it had a peak launch player count of 1,228. The next month, that dropped down to a peak of 538, which is about 56%-ish drop. But that's kind of normal for early access games. If you look at other games in this space, like hardcore milsim or realistic shooters, I'll say Squad, Postscriptum, which has a story of its own to go through, Hell Let Loose, and Arma, I think they all have that same experience where players will drop off after the initial month, but then players may come back once the game gets further updated. And those previously mentioned games do show that there is an audience for this style of game. But maybe it's because it was a World War I first-person shooter. If we look at Isonzo, which I played on launch, I think that is a really good first-person shooter. That game had 4K players at launch on Steam, and that dropped 76% for the next month. The Great War Western Front, while that's a World War I RTS, that had 3.5K on launch and then 1.1K the next. The only really successful World War game, like shooter, I can think of is Battlefield 1. But that's as close to World War I as I am to being a good YouTuber. Also, it has got the Battlefield name attached to it. It could be that maybe because it did launch in early access and people could just be tired of early access games. I know I am a bit. I've got a lot of early access games on my wish list on Steam, which I'm not buying because I'm going to wait for them to actually fully release, because when games go into early access, there's a lack of content, lack of optimization, bugs, it's unfinished, and too many games release too early, which, with all these other issues I've just said, players will leave and very, very few will come back. If you look at the early reviews for the early access release of Beyond the Wire, people do complain about the lack of content optimization and the bugs, which is to be expected in early access, but because there's been like a handful of really great early access releases, I don't think people have the patience anymore for these buggy early access games, especially when we get AAA releases that release in such a really bad state. I think if you're a developer and you're watching this video, why are you watching this video to be honest, but when you're going to release a game in early access, it pretty much needs to be like a finished product nowadays. I think having an unfinished product going up against games that are fully released, why should I play your game over someone else's game? You need to be either having like a really unique product and at least make it really polished for the start. I think you need to release early access in a polished state, like optimized and a lot of bugs squashed, but have the minimal content, I guess. But have the very first experience of the game be really, really solid and smooth. Another reason could be that there wasn't enough advertising done by the publisher, Oxford Industries, who are the developers for Squad. If your new game launches at a peak player count of 1,200, then something's a bit off, really. Either you haven't shouted out enough about it, meaning you've done a lack of advertising, or there just isn't enough interest in what that game is, be it a World War I realistic shooter, or that it uses the OWI core framework, which is pretty much the base code of Squad, which can be licensed out to people. Beyond the Wire uses it, Postscriptum uses it, and the new Starship Trooper uses it as well. And it could be that people don't want to play games created from this OWI core, because really, when you play Postscriptum or Beyond the Wire, it feels like Squad. Maybe it feels like a well-made mod of Squad, and maybe people just want something that feels different and more fresh. Something like Burning Lands, which is coming out, which is going to be the new sort of hardcore realistic Vietnam shooter. The developers for that created the Australian DLC faction for Squad, but they're not using that OWI core, they're creating their own thing from the ground up. Maybe Beyond the Wire should have done that. But ultimately, do I recommend buying the game? No, not at all. Even if it was one of the best games you could play, definitely not, because the only 2 to 3 servers that are active are community ran, and they could shut down any day now. And it just doesn't really make financial sense to keep those servers open, which makes me feel like they will be shut down soon. And like I've said, I think many times before, it's kind of disgraceful that the devs or publishers have no official servers themselves. It really shows that the game is abandoned and dead. If you'd like to support the channel, click the join button below the video, or check out my Patreon instead. Give the video a like if you liked it, dislike if you didn't. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of Beyond the Wire, if you played it or not, or why you didn't play it. Subscribe for more, and thank you for watching.